Welcome back to another episode of Industry Insider. I'm your host, Mackenzie Grant, and today I'm joined by Blair Earle, the Managing Director for IAA Canada, and Richard Pasta, Director of Strategic Partners with CARFAX Canada. How are you both today?
Doing great
Doing
today. Thanks for having us.
fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Today we're going to be talking about vehicle fraud. Vehicle fraud in Canada is evolving and it's costing insurers, repair facilities, remarketers, and auto finance providers millions each year. From stolen vehicles and VIN cloning to claims manipulation, organized crime and digital tools are creating a new level of sophistication. Before we dive in, would you both be able to introduce yourselves and just a bit about the work that you do in the industry?
Sure. Blair, do you want me to take that first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So my name's Richard Pasta. My automotive career spans over 3 decades now. Getting old, Mackenzie. My I've been very fortunate though in those 30 plus years to have been part of some great organizations in the auto industry. I've held various roles at the OEM level, daily rental, consumer leasing, automotive wholesale, automotive retail, and with an auction. I currently lead the bank, insurance, government, automotive remarketing, and OEM teams. That's a mouthful, as Director of Strategic Partners at CARFAX Canada.
Amazing, thank you. And yourself, Blair?
Yes, Blair Earle, Managing Director. I'm not as old as Richard, but I've been in the industry for quite a time. I started out with a manufacturer, and Richard and I have crisscrossed paths in our careers. I've dealt with everything from remarketing to being involved in the insurance industry, and lucky enough to work with a great Canadian company with over 42 plus years in Canada, and also recently part of Ritchie Brothers RB Global, which is another strong Canadian company started in 1958. So our roots are in this country, and we've been involved in the automotive car park for quite a time. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Thank you so much. So you both have a very clear line of sight into some data here. Equite Association reported that in 2024, over 57,000 vehicles were stolen. What do those numbers mean on a larger scale, and what stands out most when you look at those data sets?
Yeah, just I guess to expand maybe a little bit on those numbers, and according to our data, we at CARFAX, we've identified over 372,000 vehicles as having a potential fraudulent VIN. We've also seen a 93% increase in VIN fraud investigations just this year.
Wow. And there's also some numbers that show from the first half of 2025, there's a promising downward trend in auto thefts across the country, with provinces like Ontario and Quebec seeing some significant drops. What does that indicate?
Yeah, what's really interesting, Mackenzie, is that while the numbers of vehicles being stolen has gone down, the number of vehicles actually being recovered is also dropping. Back in 2022, about 84% of stolen vehicles were found and returned. We fast forward to 2024, and that number dropped to just 60%. And in just the first half of this year, it slipped a little bit more, and now it sits at 58% of vehicles are being recovered. So, yes, fewer cars are being stolen, but fewer of them are also making their way back to their owners.
Yeah. And there's a bit of government support there too with the newly developed National Action Plan on combating auto theft, which has provided a little bit of funding there to the Canadian Border Services Agency to track those stolen vehicles leaving the country. With that plan in place and border agencies being resourced a bit differently, what has the impact there of that National Action Plan been?
So, a big part of it is the National Action Plan. They've connected all the authorities that are responsible for the automotive network in Canada. So, the Canadian Border Services Agency, the RCMP, their Interpol division, and they've really concentrated and worked together with manufacturers, insurers, and remarketing companies on the theft that's taking place. And as a result of that, they've made a big difference. They've deployed teams through a project called Drive Out, which was the RCMP Interpol division, and they deployed Canadian vehicle examiners to West Africa to look for vehicles that have been stolen. And the big piece is that we all pay for that in the automotive car park in Canada with insurance rates, with the number of vehicles being stolen. So those efforts have really made a difference.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you think over the past several years there's been an increased public awareness of this auto theft?
I do. I think the public awareness is as a result of the efforts by all the agencies working together. And Equity put together quite a team dating back to 2021. And it's made a difference as, that what I would call the technical and data fraud and auto theft has taken place in the country. And those rates rose over the last 4 to 5 years that Richard referred to. The sophistication of theft, these are not smash and grab vehicles, and the public is aware of it. They're taking extra efforts with their own vehicles and making sure they've got everything from a club to make sure that they protect their fobs of their vehicles in their own house.
Yeah, it's definitely getting more sophisticated. And Blair, I guess something that a lot of the public wouldn't know is happening. You're helping bring stolen Canadian vehicles back home from overseas ports. Would you be able to take us inside what that looks like operationally?
Yeah, I'll give a brief summary at a high level. You get contacted by a client, and that could be an insurance company, a remarketer, or manufacturer, and they've found vehicles in ports around the world. They create an assignment with us from, XYZ country, and then all the documents are shared back and forth. The efforts that are put together by all the agencies working together have produced tremendous results. The vehicle gets secured, and then a transportation plan is put in place, and that vehicle is brought back to Canada. And why it is so important is that it brings down the cost when we auction off that vehicle and return the funds back to the customer, which is the insurance company or the remarketing company. And that keeps all of our premiums lower in this country. So those efforts have really taken off, especially over the past 24 months. It's very important that it continues. And the National Action Plan on combating auto theft has made a big difference.
Yeah, and kind of like you were touching on there, the impact isn't limited to just one sector. I think from what I'm understanding, insurers are feeling it, repairers are feeling it, all the way down to the customer. When you zoom out, how does fraud and this theft ripple through the whole industry?
Well, for insurers, I mean, the higher claims costs on premiums for all of us to recapture their efforts and the time and effort of SIU investigation, those resources can be spent on other things for the insurance company. And for repairers, they've got a risk to make sure the vehicle that they show up and are repairing, they got to make sure that VIN, which is the fingerprint of the vehicle, is correct. So there's extra steps for everybody. For remarketers, I mean, in an area that's so important, what CARFAX does with us as a company, we go through all of those efforts to make sure that everything is meeting the compliance needs. And then, in the finance and repossession space, the theft that takes place, both of those companies, both of those segments of the business have to reclaim those vehicles and put them back to reclaim their assets.
Yeah, and Richard, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as Blair mentioned, so the costs show up everywhere. Canadians are seeing higher insurance premiums because of the increase in claims and investigations. Insurers are also having to invest in new tools and technology to support the SIU teams, which also drives up the cost. There's also the time factor, and that's huge. It takes an incredible amount of time and resources to deal with these complex fraud cases. And if you think about the time an investigator now has to spend examining which vehicle has the fake VIN and which one has the real VIN, it's incredibly time consuming and painstaking work. And lastly, I'll add that in addition to the cost and the time, there's reputational risk. Those risks expand across dealers, repair shops, and sellers who unknowingly sell or work on cloned vehicles.
Yeah, and from the day-to-day side, like you had mentioned, there's a lot of that cost being allocated to time, that untangling and verifying and reversing. How much of that cost there do you think is simply just human hours?
Yeah, that's a good one. And it's a lengthy process, really, to unwind or to call detach a clone VIN from your vehicle. So getting ahead of it and being proactive is the best way to avoid delays when it comes time to moving in or out of your vehicle. I was going to review a real world example, but really without the vehicle history report as a visual, it's kind of difficult to follow. So I thought I'd paint a high level picture here of what we're seeing when it comes to owners finding out that their vehicle has been a victim of auto fraud. We see examples every day where a vehicle has been used as a trade-in on another vehicle. And at some point in the vehicle sales cycle, an inspection and a vehicle history report are completed on the vehicle being traded in. It's pretty normal and common occurrence. Upon the review of the history report, usually it's unbeknown to the owner. Warning flags in the history report of that vehicle that are being traded in appear. The red flags vary from vehicle to vehicle, but things like the vehicle being registered in another state or another province, or service history showing up in another state or province, the vehicles appear to be leading this double life or this parallel life. It's really crazy. Dealers nor consumers want a vehicle that's been cloned, and mainly because auto finance companies won't lend against them, insurance companies won't insure them, and it's ultimately up to the dealer or the consumer to prove the vehicle is the original or the donor vehicle and take steps to disprove or remove that cloned history. The process, Mackenzie, is not easy. It's very time consuming and can be very, very costly.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I guess that kind of sets the stage for where the collaboration between IAA and CARFAX comes in. The companies paired together in 2022, and it was a very strategic move. So, what was the original intention there? What was the problem that both of you, Richard and Blair, were looking to solve?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is providing total transparency to our buyers. And, I refer to that VIN number as being the fingerprint of the vehicle. It's so important that that establishes the history of it, the data that's tied to it. We provide a Carfax on every vehicle in our inventory, and the buyer only has to purchase the Carfax on the vehicle that they buy. But that really lets them dig into it. And as Richard said, it also having that Carfax creates flags. If anything pops up out of the ordinary, we're able to identify it and go back and do some other research on that vehicle to make sure the VIN is accurate. So it's been a big step in the industry, and since 2022, we've received accolades from both our sellers and buyers for being so proactive in that process.
Yeah, I echo that. And you guys really the impact team just really established themselves there as the leader, early adopters, and the first ones to recognize really just how important the vehicle history reports are for vehicles that have been in an accident or written off by insurance companies. Just great transparency and really says a lot about Impact's commitment to doing things right.
Yeah, that's amazing. With this partnership, you both have kind of watched this evolve firsthand. What do you think is driving that acceleration of fraud at the moment?
I'll take the first part of that, Richard. I really believe there's a supply and demand equation. I mean, we're very lucky in Canada that we have the variety, models, and makes of vehicles to choose from as consumers. In many countries around the world, some of this higher end product is not available. And that leads to the opening for organized crime and the sophistication that we're seeing today in stealing those higher end in vehicles. And the agencies all together, the partnerships have really done a great job over the past 24 months of focusing in on that side of the business of auto theft. And that's a big part of the reduction we're seeing. Richard?
Yeah, I'd echo that. And it really just comes down to the two things is money and shortage of vehicles globally. Vehicles are a lot more valuable than they used to be. Prices have more than doubled over the last decade, and stealing a vehicle is just far more lucrative today. Organized crime has also long treated auto theft like a business. Compared to something like drug trafficking, penalties for auto theft are often lighter, which means offenders they can get back onto the streets much quicker.
Yeah, and how would you describe the shift in technique? I know, Blair, you had kind of spoken about this earlier, that we're not just talking about crowbars and smash and grabs anymore. How has that theft changed as cars have gotten more and more high tech?
Well, I think the best example is the number of neighborhoods where the thefts have taken place, and it's now being stolen with a laptop and a phone on the side of a car as they take the code from the fob inside the house. And some of the examples you can see them in the neighborhoods are on social media, and they can open the car, start the car, and be gone. I think in under 60 seconds. So
I think one of the records was 48 seconds from the driveway. And one of the other things we're seeing is the crackdown has happened in urban markets. These theft rings are smart enough. They've moved out to new territories and new smaller communities and targeted vehicles. And the efforts that are out there in the marketplace are very important to crack down going forward as well. Richard.
Yeah, I think as well the range, right? The range of these thieves. You have the amateur thieves, and some of it still is occurring where the brute force, the smash and grabs, or just straight up carjackings, still prevalent. And then you've got, like Blair, you mentioned, is the more sophisticated criminals using tactical high tech tools to bypass security systems, and they just take these cars quietly. The tech side has really changed the game. They've also gotten really good at falsifying documents. And I'll share a real world example with you. This happened at a provincial registration office. We won't name which one, but it's a really great case study. Typically, a dealership will send a dedicated representative or representatives to handle their new vehicle registrations. On this day, the frontline license registration staffer noticed the person at the counter wasn't one of the normal reps that the dealership had sent and raised a bit of a red flag. They then noticed something else that didn't quite line up. The prices on the new trucks being registered were significantly lower than what they had seen that same dealer earlier in the week. So just to be safe, the registration staffer picked up the phone, called the dealership directly just to double check. And sure enough, the dealer had no record of the vehicles being submitted for these new registrations. In fact, the vehicles weren't even listed with them as being sold, nor are they even in the dealer's inventory. So if the employee hadn't trusted their instincts, several vehicles really would have ended up with brand new ownerships and plates under false pretenses. As it turns out, the fraudsters had forged everything, the bill of sale, so the dealer's bill of sale, the registration paperwork, even the NIVIS, which is the new vehicle information statement that's issued by the manufacturer when a brand new vehicle is registered in Canada. Pretty crazy stuff.
Wow. Yeah, definitely crazy. A lot of different techniques, I think, like you had mentioned, back from the old school with brute force all the way up to, yeah, falsifying paperwork, which is quite advanced.
Yeah.
As for movement patterns, I think this is being tracked. Are we seeing more stolen vehicles now that are staying in Canada because those ports are getting harder to clear?
Yeah, the ports are for sure. They're under tighter control. A lot of vehicles now currently circulate domestically. So they move between provinces in the east-west pattern, or they're crossing the border into the US. A smaller amount of them still get exported overseas, but the stricter port checks have made that harder, not impossible, but harder. And then there's chop shops. They dismantle cars into parts, which makes the vehicles easier to move and sell, and parts go into the containers and they're shipped anywhere.
Yeah, I guess that would be definitely kind of tricky to try and navigate from a tracking perspective. So, separate from the original 2022 integration, the two of you have continued building new layers of collaboration. How's that strengthening early detections today before harm is happening?
I think the biggest thing is the data that we both have as two strong leading companies in the Canadian automotive car park, and the sharing of that data back and forth identifies the VIN when it is not the original VIN for the vehicle, and we can take action quite fast.
Yeah, it is the data, right? And the shared data and our history reports and some tools that we have provide essential vehicle details, including those history flags that you mentioned, and some fraud detection to just add an extra layer of early detection.
Yeah. So if someone listening is an adjuster or a dealer or even a consumer, someone, like me who's looking at buying a car at some point, what are those early tells that something might be off?
Yeah, well, so whether you're a dealer, insurer, or consumer, it's difficult to detect VIN fraud, right? Without trusted, we go back to data and or technology to identify suspicious patterns or gaps in the vehicle history. Looking for inconsistencies like the vehicle being registered or serviced in one province or state and then popping up somewhere else just a few days or a week later. It's a big red flag. We at CARFAX, we search millions of data records to flag potential fraudulent activity and help, consumers, dealers, and insurers detect fraud earlier. I often refer to like checking your credit report to protect your personal finances. You should be checking your vehicle's history the same way. It's one of the best ways really to spot potential fraud. We've recently launched a vehicle monitoring tool that's called VIN Fraud Check, and it alerts a vehicle owner of possible VIN fraud so they can take steps immediately to address and correct it before selling or trading their vehicle in. Really, early detection is key, Mackenzie, and we have a full suite of VIN fraud detection tools to help consumers, dealers, and insurers as well know if their vehicle or vehicles has potentially been compromised.
Wow. Yeah. So if somebody is thinking that they might be a victim of fraud, what are those first steps that they should be taking?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's can be a lengthy process, like I mentioned before, to unwind or detach that cloned VIN from your vehicle's history. So getting ahead of it, being proactive, is the best way to avoid those delays when you're coming time to move in and out of your vehicle. A couple things you can do is first is to check the VIN against official records and to confirm with the vehicle's original manufacturer to make sure it matches their data. And lastly is to report it right away. Contact your provincial ministry or state department or insurance provider or us so we can properly investigate the situation.
Yeah. So really, this is an industry-wide issue that goes right down to the consumer. So the more aligned the industry is, the less room there is for that fraud to be hiding. Would you both say that that's a true statement?
That is accurate.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's correct. It's a widespread problem where better tools and tighter coordination across the industry and all levels of government and law enforcement are needed. In many ways, like this one, Blair, we're rebuilding the plane while flying it, and everyone has a role to play in combating auto fraud.
That is good. That is good. That is correct.
Yeah, I like that one as well. It's great. Well, Blair, Richard, thank you both so much for joining us here today. It's really been an interesting and tricky topic to talk about, as I know it's impacting a lot of people across the continent, really. So, yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. And thank you to everyone listening.
Thank you
That's
so
it.
much.
That's it.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Blair Impact, and for inviting me and CARFAX to join this. And thanks, Mackenzie, doing a great job of hosting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks.